Hello everybody, today we are going to look at how to create civil cells. So I've got a couple civil cells showing on my screen currently. These are some civil cells I've already created, and I'm going to go through some of the steps on how to create these. So one of the first things that we need to do is kind of get this file set up properly. What I ended up doing was taking a terrain model from one of my projects and kind of trimming it down so I just have this canvas, if you will, so that anywhere inside of this terrain model I have some existing ground that I can target so that I can end up with something like this where my end conditions actually complete. So when you create your dgnlib, you could create a dgn file and save it as a dgnlib. You could create a brand new dgnlib file and import this terrain in there. You have a couple different options. Once you've created that file, you want to make sure you put it in the right place so that when you are in your project, you're able to access these civil cells and bring them into your model. So currently I'm using FDOT Connect 10.10. That's using ORD 10.10, whatever version that is, that FDOT Connect 10.10 uses. And if you have 10.09 still installed, you'll notice that you have two different folders now. You probably still have an FDOT Connect folder, which has the FDOT Connect installation for your old 10.09, but you have this new FDOT Connect 10.10 folder. And if you look in here, you'll see that there's Organization Civil. This is essentially everything delivered by FDOT. We don't want to make any changes in there. The changes that you want to make are in the workspaces. This is essentially your location to have any sort of custom files for your company or for you. You can put them in here and they will show up when you run ORD. So we're going to dig down into here, into the FDOT folder. If you go into work sets, this is just the work set template. There's nothing really fancy in there, but you want to dig down into the standards, into dgnlib, into civil cells. So if we open up this civil cells, I've got my ITL file, my template library that I use for these civil cells. I have my main one here, and I have my demo that I'm using today. So if you put your dgnlib in this folder, it will ORD will recognize it. And it will recognize it because if you come to settings, configuration variables, and you come up to the search and type civil cell, you have this variable called civil cell dgnlib list. And FDOT has set this up so that it's searching in the Organization Civil for the DOT created civil cells, as well as in this workspaces FDOT standards dgnlib civil cells for any user created dgnlib. So as long as you put your dgnlib in there and give it a name that's star.dgnlib, it will work. And you can click on this and you can see how these expansions are working out. So the DOT workspace defines these variables that they're using in here, and they expand out to here. So they're separated by the semicolon here. So if for whatever reason you don't have these two expansions, this is what they end up looking like, and you can type those in there and they should show up. So we can go ahead and hit OK. Actually, I don't want to save anything. It doesn't really do anything. Now that we have everything set up, we can begin working on our 2D civil cell. It's really important to start with the 2D civil cell and make sure you can get this civil cell working, And by working, I mean you can actually create the civil cell by making sure it grabs all of these elements, but you're also able to place the civil cell. Once you create this 2D civil cell, then you can use your 2D civil cell to move on and start building the 3D portion of the civil cell. And I like to keep them separate. So I have a 2D civil cell and I have a 3D civil cell. And so you could use this in your dsgnrd file. You could use this in your model file. So we'll start down here. So we'll stay on this for a minute and look at some very important aspects of this civil cell. This civil cell is based on 3 different elements that are not ruled to anything. They're basically just free-floating elements out here. The first one being this white dashed line, which is my edge of pavement. And if we go into here, we can look, and this one actually, well, it's 2D. So we'll leave that at that. Once we get into the 3D, we'll see that we need to make sure this has a profile on it. The second line is this blue dash line, which is your tie down line or your right-of-way line, whichever you need it to be. And the third line is the center line of the driveway, this green dash line. So to begin, I need to set up something similar down in some free space that I have. So I'm going to go ahead and start drawing some of this, make sure I'm on white dash. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's on white dash. I like to use that just because typically edge of pavement is white. Typically our existing right-of-way line is blue or like teal, so I just went with blue, and then I just chose green. You could use red. It doesn't really matter. It's just try to be consistent with it. So if we go, and I'm just going to draw it straight across here, about the same size as the last one. And you can see I didn't rule it to anything. I'm trying to just create it straight across in space, something simple. And we get the blue, and then I'm just kind of eyeballing how long I want to make this driveway. We'll just do the same thing. And they don't need to be the same length or anything like that. You don't need to line them up. Really, I'm just trying to make them longer than what this driveway ends up being so that I can draw the driveway within the boundaries of those elements. And then we'll do this. So the way I'm going to draw this one, and the direction does matter, especially when you start placing it. So you can see I started drawing them left to right, assuming my station is going left to right. And so I'm going to draw this green line, assuming that my center line is down here somewhere, and I want to draw it from closest to the center line to furthest to the center line. And this matters a little bit. When you're placing it, you do have the opportunity to flip the direction of these. So it's not a huge deal, but it's something you want to think about. So what we want to do now is start looking at how I set this up initially. And you'll see that I have these lines that are down here. And you might be asking, well, why didn't you just offset your center line over the 6 feet? So this, I just did a 12-foot standard driveway. The reason I did that is because right now we're drawing this as if we're in a tangent section. What if this driveway ends up being on a curve? If you start offsetting, this line will still be perpendicular to the center line, but everything offset from that will be offset from that line and not necessarily perpendicular to the center line. So what I end up doing is kind of building these pieces in here so that if this ends up being on an arc, this is still 6 feet along the arc of the edge of pavement. And then these lines are drawn perpendicular from the endpoints of those lines so that they are still perpendicular to the arc. So really this line should be drawn from here, snap to the end of there if we want to make sure that we're following this arc. So let's go ahead and begin building this. So I've got a 6-foot standard width driveway. And the cool thing is, once I place this civil cell, if I want to increase the width of the driveway, I just change this number and all of this stuff will shift with it. Then we've got our 4-foot flare and our 6-foot added flare here where the curb transition. So when we come down here, I want to do my single offset partial. I'm already on my green dash. Come down here, I'm just going to offset 2 feet just to kind of get below this edge of pavement. I can snap to the end point, and then I'll hit right arrow to get to over, and then I want to make this 6. And I'm going to keep building the next one, so I want to snap to the end of that line and make this one 4. And then snap to this line and make the next one 6. And we'll do our biangle from element. And like I said, we'll do it from here. Snap to the end of here. And we can start here, come extend all the way up. We'll do the same thing for these. So right now we've added a few elements to the civil cell, and I'd like to note that these 3 lines here are children of our reference here. These 3 lines are built off of that reference and snap to here. So we have relationships built into all of these lines. Making sure that you have proper parent-child relationships ends up being very important as you build these civil cells. So we've gotten out to here, and this last line here is something we kind of end up getting to eventually. So I can't quite draw this line yet because you can see it's snapped to the intersection of these. So I'm trying to make sure that I have my extension and then my 5-foot wide flare here. So now we can start working on these elements going into the driveway. So first we probably should get the curb line. So this is the back of curb line, and that's 2-foot offset. So this is F curb essentially. And then I have my 1-foot line here that is for the distance of this driveway flare piece here. So let's go ahead and draw those. So in this case, I can just do a single offset entire element of 2 to get that. And for this exercise, I'm just going to build this half of the driveway and then come back with the completed version, show you how to make it a civil cell. So I'm just going to be drawing half of it in the demo, and then we'll have the rest of it once we go ahead and make the civil cell. So get the blue single offset partial, and I'm just going to start. It's going to be 1, and I want to hit end to get off of that 6-foot distance, and it looks like we come to that 4-foot piece here. So I can just snap to the end of that line there. And then we've got this. We've got a couple different back of sidewalk pieces here, and that kind of allows me to, so like this would be 6-foot 6-foot sidewalk, width sidewalk from that's at the back of curb. So I could adjust that if I had 8-foot sidewalk or whatever. That allows me to adjust the sidewalk and the offset of the driveway individually. So if I wanted this to be 8 feet and this to be 6, now I don't have just one line cutting through here. I have 2. So we're going to make sure that we have that one goes to the end of the driveway. So we'll get some green lines in here. Single offset partial. Come down here and make sure I'm coming off of the curb. 6. And that goes to here. That goes to the end of the driveway. So that should go to here. And for now, I'll just make this one go to the center line. It doesn't really matter what end. You can see I'm kind of snapping to different ends of these. It's just kind of whatever's easiest to get to. Because we are making sure that we're accounting for any arcs that may occur along this line. It doesn't matter if we snap to this end or this end. Now, it would make a difference if we weren't accounting for that and we were on an arc. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So now we've got this line, and that one is, so now we've got the sidewalk that comes across the driveway, which is 4 foot minimum. Again, because the way we're setting all this up, once you place a civil cell, if you want to make this 5, you just change the offset to 5, and that's where it is. This is just kind of a template, if you will, and it allows you to change it once you've placed it. If you find that, you know, all the driveways that you're creating for a particular project are 5 foot, or, you know, you got an 8 foot sidewalk and you want this to be 8, or whatever it is, maybe you modify your civil cell. You could make a civil cell specific to that project, so when you place it, you don't have to make those edits. That's an option, but it could happen that all of your driveways are a little bit different. So this allows you to make those adjustments. So we'll go with the 4. And I'm just going to do a single offset entire element because this just needs to be the entire length. We've got 4. So we've gotten all the way out to there. And let's see. So you can see with these curbs, I started making some offsets. So here we can start building maybe this back of curb. So I got on my back of curb, and that goes from, so it's right on this line from here to here. And then we've got face of curb. So this is curb F. And the reason I make this face of curb was just kind of an old habit. When we were doing, regular automated quantities back in microstation days, you would need to calculate this F curb and this F curb and this F curb. So I would just make sure that I had an F curb line for the entire thing. Sorry, we're looking at the other civil cell, but it doesn't really matter. They're the same. So just accounting for all of the F curbs. So that's just the reason I did this. You can make this curb back, because ultimately you're going to probably using automated quantities to calculate this anyway. So when this flares, we go from the standard curb top height of 0.5, 6 inches, and then it comes out to 10 inches. So what we're going to do is do a variable offset taper. And did I do it from, I think I just did it from this line here. So that should be fine. So we'll do a variable offset taper for this guy. And we're going to do 0.5, come over here. Can't type today. 10/12. Whoops. I'm just going to put this here for now. It's not working very well. Didn't want me to type that 10 over number lock. Had number lock off. There we go. 10/12. And then I'll draw this from here to here. And then I'll come in with my back a curb, draw this little piece in, snap, snap. So you can see I'm making sure all of my lines have rules. Snap, snaps. And then, you know, this guy's just offset straight from there. So it's the full length of there. So I'm not too worried about that. What can we draw next? So we can start drawing some driveway lines. So let's get our single offset partial. And we've got driveway lines from here to here. And that'll go from, sometimes you want to think about what lines you're snapping to and from. So that in that case, I chose the curb line to snap to the end of there. We do this single offset partial here. I'm going to snap to here, but now I need to snap to the intersection of those lines. And then I need to snap from the end all the way up to, so I don't want to snap to this line. I want to snap to the same one as before. Sometimes it can make a difference if your civil cell works or not. It can be a little bit finicky. This next part was a little tricky. Per the standards, the next thing we need to do is make sure that this piece right here is 5 feet. But what I also wanted to do is make sure that this line was parallel to the flare. So what I needed to do is, well, first let's go ahead and make this 5-foot piece, and we'll make this piece of sidewalk. So these are two separate pieces, you can see. I tried to make separate pieces where possible. Just helps with the dynamicness, I guess, of the civil cell. So let's go ahead and create some of those. So we're on back of sidewalk, geometry, civil offset partial. And we'll go ahead and create. So in this case, I'm snapping to the intersection. Doesn't really matter. I can just snap to the end point of here, and it's the same. And snap to the end point there. And then what I need to do is create a 5-foot piece from here. And so this time I want to make sure this is 5 feet. So we've got that. The next thing I did is I've already established the angle of this flare right here. So what I want to do is put a construction line along that, and I'm going to do a line by angle from element. Snap here, snap. I want to be 0. Now I'm going to start it down here, end it up here, just like that. Now I want to do a single offset partial. And I'm going to do, let's do single offset entire element for now. I find it easier just to draw the element first. So right now this element's just sitting here 4 feet for the entire length. What I want to end up doing is I want this offset to be ruled to here, like so. So that if I change this to 4 feet, that offset changes based upon that distance. And the same will be true if we change this to 5 feet. It changes. Okay. So let's Control Z that. So right now we've got our 5 feet, and that's why this distance ends up becoming what it is. And, you know, you could come in here and if you wanted to make it really simple, you could just come down here. But I thought it looked a little bit cleaner when it's parallel like this. And really we're going from a 6-foot section to a 4-foot section anyway. So I just thought this looked a lot nicer, and it matches the index 522.03. And I actually have it up here. I was consulting before I was doing this. But so you can see where it talks about the 5-foot minimum. and it says match driveway flare. So that's where this particular thing took me a few tries to figure out, as I was trying to make sure I did that. So you can see where all these other values come from as well. We've got the 4 foot, the 6 foot, the 1 foot. Really just looking at this standard. And here's the other side here where you could just do a 45-degree angle. Maybe that's easier. I just thought this looked a little nicer. That's the reason I went with that. So now we can create this line right here, which I said we needed to save a little bit later. And it looks like what I did with my other civil cell is I stopped it here. So what I can do is end station, and I can snap that to that same point there. So now the length of this line will change as this endpoint changes, as well as the offset. So we've got two things that are ruled to that endpoint. So we'll go ahead and create this. So I'm going to snap to here. This is where I want everything to kind of end 90 degrees. And I'm just going to go there and come up. All right. Draw this remaining back sidewalk line. And I'm trying to draw everything, left to right, up station essentially. I think it's just a good practice to do that. Oops. See, I'm still locked on that 5 foot, so I'm gonna hit end. Get that to there. So now we can kind of finish filling out the rest of this civil cell here. I'm just gonna snap to there, snap to there, snap to here, intersection snap. This one I'll do another intersection snap. So this can be a particularly interesting thing to make sure you do right. Is I want to find the intersection between the green dash and the blue dash line, not the driveway line. So I kind of have to shift my cursor around a little bit to make sure I'm grabbing the lines that I want to grab. In this case, let's just snap. So I could snap to the intersection here, or I could have snapped to the end of that line. It's not particularly important in this case. Let's see, finishing. We've got to add our edge of pavement line. You can, for the 2D one, if you don't want to draw the edge of pavement, if you want to just let the edge of pavement just run through here, not a big deal. I just kind of like finishing everything off here. So we're going to snap to here and snap to here. And just remember, when you're building the other half of this, it's just symmetrical. You're going to snap to here and then the line that would be on the other side. For length of this video, I'm trying to keep it simple by just doing half of this at a time. So got our back curb lines here. Single offset. Snap. Snap. And face a curb. So this is just, I'm just going to offset this element 0.5. Okay. I think we have the entire half of the civil cell here ready to go. So I'm going to take a little bit of time and finish this other half so that we can look at how we actually create this civil cell. Okay, I'm back after completing the full driveway civil cell over here. Just to kind of recap what I did, I actually created a civil cell out of this driveway, drew some more construction lines over here just like I did here, placed the civil cell and then dropped it and drew the rest of the civil cell over here. So we're ready to go ahead and create this civil cell. So we want to keep in mind what we used originally for the reference elements. And these reference elements can't be ruled to anything. They have to be free floating lines, no snaps, nothing. So we're going to come into model detailing, create civil cell. So they're going to ask what you want to name it. I like to put my names up here, just helps me know what I actually called them when I go and look over in the Explorer. So let's call this final 2D. And now it's asking us to find our reference elements. It doesn't really matter which order you do. I found like every new version of MicroStation before this and now ORD behaves a little bit differently. Sometimes, most of the time when I do an order, the order I select these in is the order that it ends up being when I go to place the civil cell, but it's not always the case for some reason. That's just ORD for you, I guess. I don't know. I'd like to lead with the edge of pavement. That makes the most sense to me. And then the center line, and then the right of way. So you can see as I'm clicking these, it's finding everything. Not everything quite yet, because it hasn't. The things that are gray are things that won't work yet because they aren't ruled to just that. I need to finish selecting all of my reference elements. So if I select my center line, pretty much everything comes up because everything is pretty much based off of that center line with all of the green dash lines we created over here. They're all off of this center line. You can see we have one last thing up here, which is our reference element, and then the edge of this driveway. So if I select my reference element, you can see my orange reference elements and my blue lines that are going to be brought into the civil cell. If you still have gray elements after you've selected all of your references, then that means something isn't working in your civil cell. Something is not snapped to something properly. Your references are not free floating. They must be ruled to something, or you have other lines out there that are not children of the three reference lines that you have selected. So those are some of the things that you can look out for. And I think once we give this webinar and once this video goes up, I think that might be a follow-up video that we can do if I get some questions as to, hey, why doesn't my civil cell work? That can be a follow-up video is to try and help some people out, like maybe evaluate some civil cells that people are creating and figure out what the problems might be. You're going to run into problems. And it's a really good idea as you're creating your civil cell to try this, try to build it. You know, maybe if you did half of it and you tried to build it and something wasn't working, you could fix it before you build the other half. That's an intelligent thing to try. But that's a big part of the process, especially as we move into the 3D portion. You want to test it to make sure that it's going to work. And that's why we build the 2D before we even touch anything in the 3D, because we want to make sure the 2D line work can actually be brought into a civil cell before we start introducing corridors and templates and potentially profiling some of these elements. So we can see that everything's done. I'm going to right click for reset to complete. I'm just kind of paying attention to my prompts here. And I don't have any optional references, and left click to accept. Okay, now it's been created. So we can go over here to explore. Let's pin this over here. And we want to look at OpenRoads model. Open this up and look at the civil cells. So this is the reason that I put my names over my civil cells, because this particular file can get a little out of hand when you have a lot of different civil cells like I do, especially when you have 2D civil cells and 3D civil cells are the same thing. So we can find, at times it drops to the bottom, but it looks like it's up at the top this time. Different versions of ORD do different things. We want to open this up, look at our references, expand this out a little bit here. Where's the edge? So we can see that this should be the order in which it's going to ask you to place the civil cell in your file. But right now, these things are just called, and if you click on them, you can see which elements they are. If you open these up, there's the center line. There's the blue line. It's pretty easy for me to tell because it's what it's being called. But, you know, what if somebody doesn't draw this on white dash or this on green dash or this on blue dash? They don't know what that is. If they haven't created the civil cell, they don't necessarily know what these references are supposed to be. And it's pretty important when you're placing your civil cell to choose the correct reference. Otherwise, nothing is going to work. So we want to rename this. And sliding over being weird. Let's see. Rename. All right, so we're just going to have to start typing. So I just call this, in this 2D case, I just call this EOP. And we'll rename this. So right now, the default name it's giving is the path to the feature that it's on, which doesn't really help anybody. And then we'll call this driveway CL. And then we're going to rename this to right away or tie down. Okay. So now when somebody goes to place this, we know how we need to place it. So that's basically how to create the 2D driveway civil cell. And as we move on to creating the 3D driveway civil cell, we're actually going to use the 2D civil cell that we created here to begin creating the 3D civil cell. Okay, now we're ready to start the 3D portion of this civil cell. So we've got our 2D civil cell created, and now we want to actually place that civil cell. So we can go to Model Detailing, Place Civil Cell. Shows up down here, and I have dark mode activated, but there are some dots here. Some theming issues with dark mode right now that we'll probably see more of here as we progress through the video, but I really like it, so I'm dealing with it for now. And you can see we have a list of things here, and that kind of goes back to the configuration variable as it was set up. We can see all of the FDOT created dgnlibs. I haven't really taken a look at what they've done for 10.10, as I've just found it easier to create my own civil cells and continue using those because I'm familiar with them. But you can see here my Model 99 civil cells is sitting here. The main civil cell file that's in my workset FDOT standards dgnlib folder here. So this file here. And it's probably not showing this demo file because that's what the active DGN currently is. So I'm going to choose the active DGN because I just want to grab one that's in this file right now. I'm going to grab this demo final 2D, hit OK. See, here's exactly what I'm talking about. We saw that I chose edge payment first, then driveway CL, then the right-of-way tie-down. But that's not the case when I'm placing it. This has been I guess I'll call it a bug. It's been a thing since I first started creating civil cells back in MicroStation. A little bit frustrating because you would think that when I place them, when I create these references in a specific order, that's the order that I want them in. But it goes back to my point about renaming those so that you know which reference is which. So I know that I just have to do driveway CL first, EOP next, right away or tie down next. And you can see that there's a few different things you can do. I talked about how you could change the direction of these elements. Let's say you drew this thing in the wrong direction and you flipped it. For right now, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't really matter which direction, these lines. So it shows you what it is. If you click it, if you left click on the line, it flips it. We have it the way that we want. So you can flip these if you want. It kind of comes in more when I have some curb ramp civil cells where I've done them on one corner, but they also apply on the opposite corner. So in that case, I might use this flip to get them to show up properly. But right now we're looking good. We're going to right click and then we're going to left click to accept. Sometimes it takes a minute and we're good. So we've got everything drawn in here. Let's move this out. So since I want to continue working on this civil cell and make it into 3D, I don't want to leave it as a civil cell right now. There's a couple different ways you can do this. You can choose drop civil cell and then come over here and click on it. Sometimes that doesn't work or hasn't worked in the past for me, so I just want to show you the other kind of foolproof way for me is to come over back to the handy Explorer, and you can see we have this 2D1. So that's, you'll probably see that if you place this civil cell multiple times in a file, it's just going to keep numbering them. So the first one was 2D, the next one's 2D1, the next one will be 2D2, so on and so forth. So this is the one here. We can click on it and it'll highlight, so I know that's the one. If I right click and drop, that seems to be the foolproof way to make sure that this thing is no longer a civil cell. And you can check by, if you hover over this, you can see it says on the second line, belongs to driveway FDOT demo final 2D. So you know this thing is still a civil cell. This one, on the other hand, doesn't have that. So that's how we know we can continue forward with this civil cell. So now there's a few things that we need to do in order to get this thing 3D. The first thing is what I hinted at the beginning of this video, is we need to profile this thing. So I'm gonna get on this same, I just like to make sure I'm on the same feature as the 2D portion when I'm drawing the 3D. And then we can come down here in the profile. You can see I don't really want to choose this as my existing ground because it looks like I'm on a piece of my terrain that's going through some sort of side street or something. So I just want to simplify this. I want to go to profile line between elements. I'm going to zoom out here and make sure I just go to the edge. And I kind of just want to make sure that my proposed surface I make is a little bit higher than the existing ground, so that you can see I'm tying down a little bit over here. I'm really just trying to make it for visualization purposes, but see, like, my edge of pavement's a little bit higher than the ground over here. So what I want to do is I'm just simplifying this by creating a profile. I don't like making it flat either. I think if you just give it a little bit of a grade, it doesn't really matter, but something close to what you would expect on a typical roadway. I mean, most of our curb and gutter roadways are 0.3% at a minimum. So if you do something like that, that should work just fine. And then we want to make sure that we set this as the active profile. Before I do that, let's slide, figure out where I am in space real quick. Here's my 3Ds. So right around here, when I set this, now we've got our 3D line over there. I don't need a profile for this because it doesn't really need one, but we do need a profile for this line here. So in this case, this is probably going to be existing ground anyway, and I don't really have any weird looking ground back here. So I'm just going to set this as existing ground. Okay. Now, I want to make sure that I put a profile on this edge of pavement line, because this is the line that I'm going to use to put my corridor on and then attach my templates. You do not want to put your corridor on the reference element. I learned that back when I was painstakingly learning how to create civil cells, and that was one of the big no-nos and one of the big problems that I was running into as I was trying to create corridors along a reference element, and that just ended up being a bad time. So don't do that. So we want to do profile. You can do profile by slope, profile by vertical offset. I usually do slope just because it's on top, I guess. So you can click on that, reset to complete. Reference element is going to be this, and then 0. Click through. Okay, so now this guy, edge of pavement, has got an active profile. Okay, so now that it has an active profile, I can create a corridor out of it. If I want to make sure that the corridor, I guess it doesn't really matter. We can name the corridor. What did I name it over here? I just named it the name of the civil cell. Let's just do this. So I'll copy that. And I want to create a corridor. So I'm just clicking on that, waiting for the context menu to come up and letting it create corridor. We're going to right click, reset for active profile. Before I do that, looks like I haven't created a corridor here yet in 10.10. So that's a good idea to come look at this. I never put it on prelim. Prelim is going to be way too far apart as far as the drops and everything to be looking good. So we want to be on final. And so we can right click, and here's where we can paste our corridor name. Now I've got a corridor. So I'm just going to leave that corridor there because I want to go and look at the templates that we are going to place on this corridor. Let's look at our template library. So I have in my template library up here, I have a folder with all the templates that I'm using for this driveway. So the first one, obviously on the edges, we're just going to have a little bit of curb sidewalk here because we've got to account for this little section here where we have just normal curb and some sidewalk. So in this case, is there a flare? There's not a flare. Oh, I'm looking at flare left. So this one here. So we've just got curb sidewalk. If we look at this screen, no, look, they didn't feature this either. I've got this flying out all the way to 10, and then it's looking back 10. You could do it differently if you wanted to make it 6 and look out. That might be a little better. I don't know why I did this really. This was probably taken from a curb ramp one, because typically with curb ramps, I want to make it much wider than the curb ramp will ever be so that I can look back and end up going down to 0. But in this case, let's just change this. Change that, and then we can look left for like 50. You know, we just wanted to look a long way, but ideally we're looking for this back of sidewalk, right? So you can see I've got my slope in here. If I've had projects where we use 1.5% for some reason, so if you needed to do that, go ahead and change that. Hit OK. So we'll go ahead and we'll close. It'll save. And let's go ahead and grab our bucket here and start putting some templates on this thing. So let's add, when I place a template, I like to make sure, I don't always trust this thing. I want to make sure I actually go select it. Driveway, no strip, sidewalk. And again, it's important to snap to things with this. You don't want to just let this free float out here with and not ruled to anything, because then your civil cell is not going to create. So I'm going to snap to the end of this green line to the end of this green line, and obviously not 25. Let's do 2, because I want this to be, it's not very long, and I want this to be pretty tight. And you can see I'm starting from left to right because that's the way the stationing's going. But we can just stick this other one over here because it's going to be the exact same over here, right? Okay. And another awesome part of theming that it doesn't do that. So that might make things a little complicated here, but we'll get through it. So we'll close that and we kind of look at what it's doing out here, right? But you can see it's not going out and finding the thing that we need. It's not following that sidewalk, which is because we haven't set up the external reference. So I'm going to add these two things as my external reference. Now we've got this back of sidewalk is following that. The next piece is this flare bit here. So we'll go look at that. Driveway flare. So I've got these two different ones here, and we're just going to do this regular flare left for right now, which just ties at 1 on 4. But I've also got this variable tie one, which perhaps we can look at switching that out here. So you can see I've built in the 1 foot flare width, but it's also looking an additional 10 feet for a driveway horizontal feature constraint. So as that driveway flares out, you'll be able to tie to that. So it's going to find this line right there. And we've got our back sidewalk, which is, let's see what this guy's doing. Let's just switch this guy over. It's 50. See how that works. So we'll add those template drops. And those drops are going to go flare left from here to the driveway. Keep that at 2. You'll see the back of sidewalk stays good until it hits the end of there, and now it has no more reference. So let's add this other one. Okay. So you can start seeing right now the benefit of creating these driveway civil cells, because you'll see how long it takes to add all of these external references, and we're going to start getting into parametric constraints and getting everything set up so that these driveways actually look right. It takes a while, and if you don't have to do it every time, it's really nice. So we're going to grab this for the 2. We're going to do the sidewalks first. That should get us our back sidewalk line. Now we need to get our driveway flare. Okay. So now we've got our driveway flare going on here. But the problem is, it's eventually this needs to start dropping down into here. And we'll get to that once we start working on the parametric constraints. So let's get to the driveway. So this one, and I believe this as well has a little guy in here called curb back out full. It's probably a little easier to see here because I already built the drop curb in, but what I'm trying to do here with this template is make sure that this point is on a vector. So I'm making sure that the drop curb, the back of this drop curb, the slope of that matches the slope of the driveway. And that's in the DOT standards. And obviously it'll make it much smoother so you don't have a bump and then a different bump here. It'll make this whole piece nice and smooth. And so the way that I've done that is incorporated this curb back out full. This is like where the F curb back would be. And then it's component. This is 10 feet from there. And again, I don't know why I did this. Very confusing. Whoops. Let's do 50. Or actually, that was okay. Minus 10 and 10. But we can make it. Let's just do this. So that means that this point will be 2% from where the curb back should be, and kind of allowing this flare to be what it needs to be to make sure that the sidewalk just kind of continuously flows through the driveway area, and the only thing that's changing is the driveway flare. And then obviously we've got this guy out here, so that's looking for driveway, and this one's looking for sidewalk, back of sidewalk. So I had to make sure that I had two different types of references to search for, because it could get confusing if this was driveway and the other one was also driveway. It's just not you could probably make it work, but maybe not for every situation. So it's just easier to have this one is searching for the back of sidewalk. So that one's looking for this line. And this guy is looking for this line. And this is all hollowed out because this is basically, I'm just horizontally trying to find this. And then the template is just searching for the active surface at that horizontal location. So go ahead and save it again. Close. And template drop. Left. Snapping again, making sure we're snapping. Okay, so you can see it's drawing exactly what's in the template. And you can see here, see how this back of the drop curb is matching the flare. But then when we come in here and let's add, I guess we just need to add them both at the same time, otherwise it's going to be weird. I think we need to add this and this and this. So there was actually already two driveway pieces in here. This guy is looking for a driveway as well. So that's where it would get confusing. If there was three different things it was trying to find and your driveway didn't particularly line up with the way this template was set up, it might not find all three of those. But you can see now we've got it finding everything. So you can see how the sidewalk is just flowing through here. And it might be easier to see. Point this out real quick. On all of my templates, I put a top mesh and a bottom mesh. And that helps me at the end of the project when I need to create all of my meshes for the final submittal. I can just reference in my models, turn everything off except DTM top mesh and DTM bot mesh, and create my terrain from that. That was just a suggestion I got from a colleague back when I started learning how to do this stuff. And, it seems to be an easy way to make sure that we can create our meshes without having to worry about anything else at the end. So that's why we've got all these extra lines happening in here. So if we turn off those, now you can kind of more cleanly see what's happening in here. So yeah, I mean, we've got a driveway, and if you cut a section through here, it'll look great. If you cut a section here, it's going to look great. It's going to cut a section through there, it'll look good. You know, this is perfectly acceptable for a job where you are not submitting a 3D model, because your cross sections are going to look exactly the way they should. You know, when you cut a section through there, you'll see we've got drop curb, we've got our curb matches our flare, we've got our driveway, and then our driveway ties right back down to existing. But that's way different than what we're seeing here, right? We've got curb coming down, making all of that work. We've got all of these slopes working out. So in the next part, I will go through how to first get all the curb looking correct, and then we can start working on how to make all the tie downs work correct. All right, so we're back in the file here, and over here on the left is the civil cell that we began creating previously, and I actually just created a civil cell from it. I wanted to make sure that we were on the right path, that everything was working out correctly and everything worked just fine. I was able to create a civil cell from it, and then I brought it over to here and placed the civil cell. So I drew some new construction elements, placed the civil cell, and I've now dropped this. And we can begin making the parametric constraint changes and working on some of the tie downs. Interesting note here. The first civil cell we had over here, we were in a fill section. And you can see as I've created this new civil cell, we're in more of a cut section. So you can see how the civil cell is pretty dynamic. It changes. So it's the exact same thing, just in a different place, and it's able to fit right within the existing ground. So the next thing I did is I started creating these parametric constraints, partly because I wanted to kind of show what we were going to be doing, and mostly because I wanted a little refresh on what these things did and what I needed to actually show you. So just doing this little shift, essentially going from an F curb into a drop curb, took me 5 constraints. So we can go over those constraints now. We want to go into our flare left. So the first was the curb face height, which is here. So you can see the curb face height is 6 inches above the gutter per standard. And what we end up doing along that length is we bring that height from the 6 inches down to 0. And then on the same token, we do the curb face offset is 2 inches from the gutter per standard. And then we bring that down to nothing. So essentially across that distance of 6 feet, we're bringing this point down to match this point. The next thing that we're going to do is we need to adjust the gutter width from the F curb width to the drop curb width. So if we go look at this point, we've got a gutter width. That width is 16 inches. That's for F curb. And for drop curb, it's 14 inches. So we need to make that adjustment. And we also have our gutter depth. So an F curb depth is 2 inches, or not 2 inches, 0.125. It's 1.5 inches. And the drop curb depth is 1.25 inches. And I'm getting all this stuff from standard index right over here. So I'm just looking at I'm looking at F curb and I'm looking at drop curb and figuring out how I need to transition my F curb into my drop curb. And the final one is a little bit trickier. So that goes back to that curb back out full. And I have a curb back vector offset. So right now, this point is being controlled horizontally from the ref point, which is out here, edge of pavement, essentially. It's 2 feet from there. And then it's on the vector between the driveway flare out and the curb face out. Driveway flare out is at top. Yeah. So right now it's on this vector. And I set it up so that initially I came in here and made it so that the vertical between here and here was 0. And once I had that set, I then switched this constraint over to vector offset, because ultimately once we get down to the drop curb, we want this to here to be one continuous line right now. So if you were to strike a line between driveway flare out top and curb face out, it would be up here, and this curb back out full would be 005 below it. That's basically what we're looking at there. So it's not quite on the vector. It's just below the vector. So I have this curb back vector offset that we're going to change from this value that it's currently at to 0, which will place that point on this vector as we transition. So that does it for all of those. So you can see I've already done this. We'll go ahead and do it on this side. And it's going to be kind of backwards, so that should be fun. Really should have done that side first, but this will be interesting. Anyway, we're already on here, and you can see I have the 5 items in here, and good old Bentley in their dark mode. Didn't get it right. Anyway, we can see it. And we're going to do, so those first 5 constraints were from here to here. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So first, I want to make sure I'm snapping. Important, again, you're snapping to the ends of these lines. And we want to find our curb face height. Click, and so at the beginning I want this to be 0, and at the end I want it to be 0.5. See how that changes? Now we can go ahead and do curb face offset. We should just be able to arrow down, grab that. So I need to go 0 to -2/12 for 2 inches. And see all the little minor adjustments happening as we do this. So I'm just doing, it's the same, space that we're working in here. And we need gutter width. So my gutter width is at this side -14/12 for 14 inches. And then 16/12 because that's the standard that's in the template. Then we'll do gutter depth next. Arrow up, gutter depth. That's -1.5, or I'm sorry, 1.25/12 to the 1.5 inches. So you're seeing all these minor little tweaks. And it might not seem like anything, but I'm kind of OCD when it comes to this. So if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right, and I'm going to make sure that I get every little piece so that when I put this thing in here, it looks like a driveway is supposed to look. And the final one is the curb back. It's probably just easier to find it, the drop down. Vector offset. Start at 0 and go to there. Okay. So you can see we've got that, but we've still got this middle portion. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing from here to here, because I know this drop curb that sits in here isn't going to be affected by these parametric constraints, because the drop curb is the drop curb. I mean, it's been modeled in there and it doesn't have the same constraints. So if I go from here to here and I do we can let's just stay in order. We'll do curb face height first. And I want it to be 0 and 0 through the whole thing. Drops it down. See, we're still not quite there, but we're closer. Curb face offset. That's got to be 0. Getting closer. Gutter width. That is minus 14 over 12. Minus 14 over 12. Depth. Their depth is minus 1.25 inches and 1.25 inches. Okay. So you see we're really close. There's like a little, we still got to get that last little vector offset in there. So let's find curve back VO. 0, 0. And we're done. So it took 15 parametric constraints to get this driveway to look like it's supposed to, or at least this driveway apron to look like it's supposed to. So now that we've gotten that, we can move on to doing the tie downs next. Now that we've gotten everything else with this 3D civil cell set up and looking nice, we can do the last thing here, which is working on this tie down. So right now you can see, obviously we need to have some sod that's in here. Somehow we need to connect these elements together so that we have a little bit more sod in here, a little bit more earthwork, clearing and grubbing, kind of trying to account for all of our potential pay items that we might have for this particular driveway. What I'm going to do is just kind of get the like a slope in here. I'm going to find this point, and I'm going to come off of here 5 feet. I kind of want to create like a 5-foot shoulder around this driveway. Based on this detail right here, this paved and graded driveway, I'm trying to create this 5-foot minimum shoulder for private driveways, just so, right next to the driveway, the drop-off doesn't start. That's essentially what I'm trying to accomplish with this. If you have potentially a ditch back here, maybe you need to figure out how to round off this ditch with your civil cell. That could be something else that you could work on if you need to have a side drain that goes underneath here. This portion is going to do a little bit of detail modeling, but we're just going to use our template to make it work. If you had a ditch, you might need to get into more detail modeling, which might increase the size of your civil cell, but that's neither here nor there. What we're going to do now is I need to first, I want to come along this line and I want to find that point right there. What I need to do is profile my elements here. So I'm going to give this curb line a profile, and it's going to be a vertical offset constant element profile reference. And I'm going to hit Alt start at the beginning, Alt start at the end. And I know that it's 4.5 inches. The back of the curb is 4.5 inches higher than the edge of pavement based on standard for an F curb. So that's what I did. We've got that line in here. You can see it lines up nicely with our back of curb. Now I need to do this back of sidewalk and this back of sidewalk. We'll just do this one for now. I'm just going to do the left side, and then I'll do the right side off video here so that we can do the final button up and create of the civil cell. So for this one, we need to do the slope of our sidewalk. In this case, we've been using 2% up plus 2%. So now you can see I found that point. So if I get on this line here, I can use my tool here. Let's get back in here. Profile intersection point. I want to find a point along this line, and I want to find the point here. So see how it gives me that point there? From this point, I can start going down or finding my existing ground. So we know from here that the line is going in this direction, profile's going in this direction. I've been using 1-on-4 tie downs, so I also have to count for the 2 feet right here. So first I want to go 2 feet this way. So if I just make this 2 and at 0, now I need to come up. See, this is where you might need to do some adjustments after you place this. In this case, we're going up and 25%. And I want this to extend out. Really just trying to find the intersection between this line and the existing ground. So once you place this, if your ground is down here, you can just come in on this line and change the slope of this element to minus 25 like this. And your line should work because it's going to then find the intersection between this line and the existing ground again. So for now, we're going to make that guy go up. And I want to create a profile here, complex, create profile complex by element. Sorry, it's dark mode. Hard to see here. So we got that. And then I want to set that as my active profile. Okay, so now I've got this line going out here. The next thing I'm going to do is up here I was using red line here. So I want to come off, snap to here, and I want to make this go 5 feet, like we said. Same thing with this. It's going to go 5 feet. I drew it over there. I just, get to that. So now this is kind of a little tricky part. What I'm going to do is draw a line in horizontal that's based on the intersection of these points. So snap to that, snap to there. So now I've got this complex element that I can create here. Let's make sure we're on manual, because if it's not on manual, it'll start picking up that driveway as well. Got those two. Okay. And then all we need to do with this element is set it to existing ground, because we've found existing ground here. We know we're trying to maintain existing ground all the way through here. Okay, so now we've got that. So now the question becomes, how do we get our template to follow that? So I'm going to turn my template lines back on here, because you can see I turn them off because it makes it much easier to work with these elements if they're off. And you do that, you end up doing that a lot, turning the template elements off and on. So the first thing I need to do is I modified a template. I created a new template and modified it a little bit. But we originally had our sidewalk, F sidewalk tie down. I just went ahead and created this var tie. So this is the point that I'm going to point control to that red line I just created. Same thing with this. We have our driveway flare left with the normal 1-on-4s, and then our var tie. So what we can do is, let's expand this out a little bit. So you can see it's highlighted, the one that we have active. click on this, and I'm going to change it to the verti, and you'll see the slope will go away. And it's just whatever is drawn there. We'll do the same thing with this. Okay, so we've got our verti. Now I need to create a point control. Snap to the line that's the beginning. Snap to the line that's the edge of the driveway. This is verti. We'll call it back, so like back station. And this is where like naming your points is pretty important. We've got left variable tie. And our mode is both, because I want to do the horizontal and vertical component of this linear geometry. I'm going to grab my line, click through everything here. Boom. We've got that tying together. And there's still a little bit of a bug with these. I guess they fixed it a little bit, but with these making point controls used to lag the crap out of ORD. You can see now we've got, it's pretty flat there. Our only issue is that buffer. That buffer doesn't want to go follow that. So what I've really done is it's just the easiest way for me to do this, since I know that this is sod, because I made this sod in my template, and this is going to be sod. I don't really care if I have a 2-foot flat here. This ends up being very close to flat as it is. So what I end up doing is adding another parametric constraint in here, and it goes from the end of this sidewalk to the driveway. And I want to do the back of sidewalk buffer width left. And it starts at 2 here, and it goes to 0 when it hits the driveway. And that helps kind of iron out that little kink there. So really, I mean, it's just components. It's not a huge deal what it ends up looking like, because we still are just sod and it's flat, if you will. But that ends up looking like. So now you've got, you know, it's all nice and rounded off. Everything's filled in. You can attribute this to sod, and, you know, figure out where your clearing and grubbing is, and your earthwork's going to work correctly. All these things are going to work. So off camera, I'm going to go finish this side, and then we can come back and finish up by creating the 3D civil cell. All right, so I finished up creating the rest of the civil cell. Just did the same thing on the other side. So here's our completed civil cell. See, we've got the sod following everything. Everything's going to line up with your templates as they come up to here and come up to here. So everything should line up. If we look at the underside here, you can see in my templates I've built in parts of the concrete that's 6-inch. So you can see here you've got 4-inch concrete sidewalk where we're out here, but then everything that's in here is 6-inch concrete sidewalk. Everything that's basically within the curb transitions and the flare and all of that stuff, I just make that 6-inch. If you want to change that to 4-inch or whatever you need it to be, you can just do that in your template, or you can handle it with parametric constraint. I like doing it with my template so that I can change the name. So the name of the 6-inch concrete sidewalk is a little bit different than the 4. I just call it sidewalk 4 and sidewalk 6. Yeah, pretty much see that everything has worked. We can go ahead and create the civil cell, and got the right name there. Name's matching what I got over that. I'm just going to do the same order that I did, and we'll see if it happens. We've got our EOP and our center line and our tie down line. This takes a little bit longer because it's taking in all of the 3D stuff. So you can see everything got brought in. All the lines are blue. Everything's looking good. We're going to reset to complete. We have no optional reference, reset to complete, and left click to accept. Again, these take a little bit longer to process just because they're more information. So we're going to go into our Explorer, pin this open, find my driveway, FDOT demo final 3D, demo final 3D. What did this call this? Oh, I think I called this 3D. Yep. Okay, so this is 3D1. So we've got that. Go to our references again. So this is our white dash. We're going to rename. I like to call this, obviously, EOP to match what we had for the 2D. But then I'll do in parentheses profiled to let any user know that this needs to be a profiled element when you're placing it. Rename this. This is the green dash. So this is just driveway CL like it was before. That does not need to be profiled. And we can rename this to right away or tie down profiled. I've got all that in there. So let's do one last test before we leave here and make sure that everything works. So I'm going to create another little template area over here. Again, this reference needs to be profiled. Ooh, at the end of my, let's move this. Where's my terrain? So this is what I want to be careful of. I'm at the edge of my terrain. Let's move this guy down here for now. Create a profile. And like I said, just like before, just something like this. Doesn't have to be anything serious. I just try to stay above the existing ground line at a pretty flat grade. And then grab this. I want to draw the blue dash, kind of the same height as I've been doing. Okay. That. And then get the green line to finish up here. Got that. Now we go back to our model detailing. We're going to place the civil cell. And I'm kind of anticipating potentially having an issue with this, depending on if this new area is going up or down. So we might have to go in and change that profile along this line that we had before. So it's 3D1. Okay. Let's see what it decided first. So driveway CL again. EOP profile. Right away tie. Okay, I don't need to change the direction or anything. Go ahead and accept. And that took a little bit of time to process, but we got it in there. And you can see that. See how these are working out? Yeah, see that one got a little screwy. So all we need to do is see how that got messed up. All we need to go is check out the profile along here. And see how that is going up and not finding anything. So if we change this to -25, boom, everything's fixed. Easy. So that's one of the really nice parts about civil cells is as long as you can anticipate what's going to happen, you know how to fix it. They're pretty dynamic, pretty easy to handle. Yeah, looks like everything's working out with that one as well, because that one was already going into a fill slope. So yeah, everything worked out just fine. We can see the changing existing ground back there. Everything's tying down to existing ground. So that worked out great. So that's the end of the driveway civil cell video. I hope you all enjoyed it, and hope you all have really good luck creating your own civil cells. Thanks.